for us. So that's really what we want to see from our speakers, really getting deep into the caves of Kubernetes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don. All right. So I've been tired of virtual for a long time. So it's so much nice to see people in person. And even if you go to sleep, that's fine. I really want to see people. I'm at that point. But this is probably my fifth, maybe sixth after COVID. So I was at a bunch of other conferences. I was lucky to attend. What did I start with? KubeCon North America. Anybody? KubeCon North America, Los Angeles. I know there were a couple of people there, Leonard, right? And yeah, and then I went to AWS reInvent. Anybody at AWS reInvent? Yeah. And the reason why I'm telling all this is because it ties into my presentation, actually. So I started off with kind of, everybody's talking multi-cloud in Kubernetes, but really nobody is quite doing it, right? So I was thinking I could do a multi-cluster, and turns out GKE was the easiest because I could set up the networking easily, and you will see, that's the hardest part of setting multi-cloud, right? The networking is the hardest part. So I started with that in KubeCon North America, and then when I went to AWS reInvent, let me make sure I have my power. Yeah, everything good? Let me start with... You getting my presentation or in there? Okay, one moment. Ein moment. Okay, so this is the time I can do some song and dance, right? Okay. Perfect. All right. So again, I don't want to kind of ignore the virtual audience. Thanks for joining as well. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So picking back from where I was talking, I was at AWS reInvent, and the GKE demo would probably not fly there, amongst the audience, right? So what I did was I tried to do something on EKS. And I came across this project called EKS KubeFed. Anybody use KubeFed, heard of KubeFed? Yeah, a few people? Okay. How many of you, by the way, are very comfortable with Kubernetes? So, I'm going to do a lot of demos on Kubernetes today. But I'll kind of walk through that. So even if you're not familiar with Kubernetes, you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. So what I did at AWS reInvent was kind of adapted to EKS, right? But I really wanted something which was multi-cloud, right? And what I really wanted was to be able to spread this cluster across 2 clouds, at least, to start with. So I went again with GKE because I was very familiar with it. And then I went with EKS. And essentially what I was able to do was kind of join them together. But the process was entirely manual. I had to do a lot of things myself and so on and so forth. So finally, today, this is really brand new. I don't think I've done this demo before. So I might struggle through this a little bit, but essentially, what I've done here is we have introduced something called as a Cassandra operator. Okay, Cassandra is our version of Cassandra running on Kubernetes. And what the Cassandra operator does is it provides for multi-cloud installation very easily. And I'll talk about all this in a second. But using the Cassandra operator, this is going to be the whiz-bang demo for today. I'm going to use the AKS as the control plane. Okay, that's the Azure Kubernetes Services control plane. And then the GKE and the EKS as the data planes. So in other words, I'm installing through Azure, but I'm installing it on Google, and I'm installing it on, what's the other one? EKS, right? So it's pretty cool, and hopefully the demo will work. But I really want to thank a few people to actually make this happen. I think, Alex, you talked about kind of data storage as a service, or data storage as code. And actually, I've leveraged that in my demo as well. But before I get to my presentation, I want to put in a plug for Chris, who's here. Chris and Patrick, right? I'm going to be doing a talk on Thursday. This, unfortunately, Patrick could not make it here, so it's going to be all virtual, right? But there are already about 600 people signed in, right? So looking like a very popular session. Chris from Ondat and Patrick from Datastax, if you get a chance, please sign up for this. And obviously you'll get a lot more than just Cassandra, because it talks about local storage as well, and how you can kind of balance the two, talk about some access patterns and so on and so forth. And you will see a very short version of my demo as well. So if you go to sleep here, you can go back and check the other demo. All right. So what I'm here to talk about is, SQL, I talk about this kind of jokingly, is that Cassandra actually precedes the cloud. There's no such thing as the cloud when Cassandra came along, right? I mean, maybe there was, but definitely, the cloud got more popularity, more traction. And how Cassandra has actually evolved, to kind of support this is just amazing. And there are some really cool things that come together to make this happen. Okay, and I'll highlight this. I'll highlight all of that during my talk. So, I wanted to go just demos only, no slides. But when I saw that, a lot of you were not, familiar with Kubernetes and not developers, I thought maybe I'll do a few slides and then we can go from there. Okay, so this is kind of what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it to minimal. Intro, Nosql to Cassandra, Cassandra and Astra. Then the most important part, this is the multi-cluster cloud with the Cassandra operator. And then I'm going to do demos, okay? Demos are cool because, you will kind of watch me struggle through this a little bit. So hopefully it'll work, okay? My name, again, is Raghavan Srinivas, if I didn't introduce myself. I work as a developer advocate at Datastax. I really come from the Java side of the world. I've been a developer for a long time, really mostly a backend developer. One of the nice things I like, or one of the cool things I like to talk about is what is referred to as the inner loop, which is really about developer productivity. It's not the robust CI/CD cycle that most people are familiar with, but if you have heard of tools called Scaffold. Anybody heard of Scaffold? Anybody use Scaffold? Yeah, cool. Draft, unfortunately Microsoft stopped supporting them. Anybody from Microsoft here? May I make a request to kind of, reinvest in that? But in any case, I'm really totally into developer productivity, and this is something that, I believe strongly in. And even today, multi-cloud demo, I have some Terraform scripts. So if you want to install, multi-cloud, you can do that, and I'll talk about that. What is the big deal about NoSQL? NoSQL is really not a big deal. It was really a catchy term that somebody came up with for a hashtag for a meetup. And that's how it became popular, because everybody was kind of sick and tired of Oracle, right? And just relational and all that. They wanted something fundamentally new, maybe easy, to adapt to schema changes and things like that. And that's how NoSQL was born. Some people refer to as NoSQL, some people refer to as not only SQL, some people refer to as new SQL. But really the idea is that, it's not the traditional relational that you know and hate, right? Or know and love, whatever, okay? So that's really what NoSQL is. And some of you might have heard of this CAP theorem. Anybody heard of the CAP theorem? So that I don't, yeah, or it's also referred to as a Brewer's conjecture. And essentially what it talks about is in a failure scenario, when everything is working fine, no problem, right? Everything works fine. But when something goes wrong, there are three properties, and you can only have two of these at the same time. In other words, you have to sacrifice one of them. One of them is consistency, the other one is availability, and the third one is partition tolerance, right? So turns out partition tolerance is actually worse than consistency, because partition tolerance, if you lose partition tolerance, then you're going to get into such an inconsistent state that even my grandmother can figure out that it is inconsistent. Whereas, if you give up consistency for a little bit, it's fine, because eventually it will become consistent. So what if I'm not the leader for 2 minutes? It's probably okay. So what if I'm not the leader for 20 seconds, right? Even though 20 seconds I was the leader, it's probably okay. And turns out even some powerful transactions, right? You can deal with eventual consistency. There are a lot of companies that are using Cassandra, but again, the model is about horizontal scaling. You can take your relational database and keep scaling up and up and up, but at some point it's going to fall over, right? Because there's only so much you can go. Whereas with horizontal scaling, the idea is that you spread your data across commodity hardware, and that will take care of not only the scaling, but it also takes care of reliability and, of course, consistency and those kind of properties. So if you look at the NewSQL or the NoSQL ecosystem, they're usually called CA, AP, or CP. Okay, and Cassandra is like a AP system. Partition tolerance is very, very important. So some of the big companies actually use Cassandra. By the way, how many of you use Cassandra already? One. Okay, cool. Okay, and hopefully some of you will consider using this after just seeing these logos. And I've talked to some of these customers. They say that Cassandra keeps ticking for years and years and no problem at all. They haven't even rebooted. I hope they've upgraded, but never know. All right, what is Cassandra? Because all of us at KubeCon, right? It's really Cassandra running on Kubernetes. And like I said, Cassandra had a lot of desirable properties, which makes it very easy to run on top of Kubernetes. And actually, I'll go one step further and say that there were certain things that the designers of Kubernetes did not consider as heavily as much as Cassandra did, okay, or the designers of Apache Cassandra did. And I'll talk about that. One of the things, how many of you, by the way, have tried to set up a multi-cluster Kubernetes cluster? Anybody? 1, 2. Okay, and that's pretty cool, because I thought it might be nobody, right? But were you successful or no? That's kind of what I see the trend. Someone over there? Semi-successful? Half? Good. What did you use for? Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So a lot of these things you have to kind of, do it as a one-off, right? There is really not good ready-made solutions, and I myself as well, doing multi-cluster in Kubernetes is pretty straightforward, and doing multi-cluster with Cassandra is, even more trivial. The thing you have to worry about is how do I set up the networking, the routing, and all that. And I'm no networking geek myself, so I will point you at some Terraform scripts which essentially make this happen. It's a very opinionated implementation, but again, the fact is that Cassandra, or Cassandra in general, is really ideal for horizontal scaling. Okay, and we'll see that in just a moment. Since it's running on Kubernetes, right? Wherever Kubernetes runs, Cassandra runs just fine, right? And now with the Cassandra operator, you can have it on multi-cloud as well. I have it installed pretty much on all the, the different clouds. We used Civo during KubeCon EU. Was it KubeCon EU? Yeah, I think so. It was KubeCon NA at Los Angeles, and we did a Cassandra workshop, which we used Civo. So if you're going to use Civo, you can do that, or you can use local installation. It doesn't matter. We have a lot of workshops, and what it does, in a sense, is it installs something called as a Cass operator. And the Cass operator does, all the Kubernetes artifacts. Let's not worry about all that. Kubernetes operators are really cool, right? Somehow they've become more, I shouldn't use that term, but basically they've become more trendy these days, right? There was a time when, Kubernetes operators was not the right thing to do, but now it's fine. And essentially, what it does is it installs all the, like for example, the things that you would do with Cassandra, like for example, repair, like for example, backup and restore. And we have a very cool API. I think, Alex, you were talking about GraphQL. Stargate provides not only REST, GraphQL, so it's really cool from a developer perspective. It also does gRPC, and name it, it's probably there. And then of course, Alex again was talking about observability. So you can send your observability metrics to Prometheus, Grafana, whatever. How do I install it? Very straightforward, right? Helm repo add and Helm repo update, and then Helm install. As simple as that, right? Very straightforward. I've already installed this. And what it does is it provides you with all of these APIs in Stargate. But if you don't want to use it in Kubernetes, right, or you don't want to manage it all yourself, we have this Astra DB, which is a database as a service. It's running Kubernetes underneath, but I don't care about it at all. It's multi-cloud, it's everything, but Datastax manages it for you. okay? And actually, it works on all the different clouds as well. All right, so the part that you're waiting for the most, right? Why multi-cluster? Cassandra has always been designed for multi-region, right? Partition tolerance was extremely important. It was, item number one, right? And then, of course, there are a whole bunch of things that we want to. Nodes automatically route traffic. We use something called as a gossip protocol. Gossip is good when it comes to technology, right? Because they can talk to each other. And as long as you have the, the ports enabled, the networking enabled, it's just going to talk to each other. And it's exactly what you're going to see today. I'm going to show it running on EKS, and I'm going to show it running on multiple clouds. But the fact is that once you have the networking enabled, it's not a big deal. It just works, right? The cluster is homogeneous from that perspective, right? So whether I'm running it anywhere else, it doesn't matter, right? But Kubernetes are not really designed for multi-region, right? And we saw examples already where some of our peers have been struggling a little bit, to kind of do this multi-cluster. But pretty straightforward. There are a number of reasons for this. I'm not going to get into that. But Cassandra operator is that easy button, right? If you think about the Cass operator, what it does is it installs Cassandra on a Kubernetes cluster. A Cassandra operator, which is sitting on top of that, thinking of hierarchies, makes it easy to install it on multi-cluster, multi-region, multi-cloud, as you will see today. That make sense? So this is the Cassandra operator, very easy to use. It's basically an operator for Cassandra. It supports multi-data center, multi-region, et cetera, Cassandra cluster. And what it does is it uses a concept of a control plane and a data plane. A control plane, as you will see today, is running on AKS, and the data planes are running on GKE and EKS. Okay, and you'll see that today. Okay. So a control plane cluster can dual function as a data plane. Okay, so if you don't want to, just waste data, that's fine. You can work with that. So essentially, this is how it kind of looks. You have a control plane, and then you install the multi-cloud cluster on the data plane. Now, obviously, from a Kubernetes perspective, you must be wondering, right? How exactly does that work, right? So how it works is, what you do is you install Cassandra on each of these data plane clusters, okay, and this may happen automatically, let's not worry too much about that. And then what you do is you inject the config of this into this, or into the data plane, and you inject the config of this into the data plane, and that's kind of how, you can install Cassandra on these different clusters. Essentially, there's a concept of a Cassandra cluster, and you'll see this in action today. You'll see two contexts here, right? One is east and the other is west. So essentially, I'm using a control plane, and I'm using east and west as the data planes, okay? So what it does is it creates a Cassandra data center and then injects the context, which essentially makes it easy to install it. All right. So this is the client config that you essentially inject into the data plane, which makes it easy to make it a multi-cluster. So with that said, let me jump straight into demos. Let me see how I'm doing with respect to time. I have about 10 minutes, which should be more than enough. All right, so let's start with the EKS KubeFed demo. Again, what EKS does is it's pretty cool. I like the project. What happened? Okay, let's not worry about this. All right. So what I'm doing here is it installs a Bastion host. And what the Bastion host does is it installs Kubernetes on two clusters, federated clusters, and sets up all the requisite things, the networking artifacts. So basically, it does the routing, security groups, peering, network peering, all of that. Because one of my requirements was that I want to make it as easy as possible for me to, I knew I was going to mess up the first time around, right? I just wanted to kind of do it over and over again. So let me see if I can connect to the Bastion host, and I'll show you what's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to connect to the Bastion host. This is running on EKS, okay? All right, so the first thing I do is do this, and then I set up the paths. All right, and Hopefully everybody can see this. And then I'm going to show you what are the contexts. Okay, so you can see there are two of these, right? One of them is fed to 1 and the other one is fed to 2. Okay, and essentially these are the two contexts where I've installed the cluster. Okay, so let me start by showing you the cluster itself. Okay, you can see here what I'm doing is I'm executing a particular node tool command which a lot of Cassandra admins use, just to get the status of this, right? So essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking one of the pods here, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm invoking this command called node tool, and I'm providing the username and the password. Not very imaginative here. Definitely don't do this, but I'm doing this for the demo, right? So I think it's pretty cool, right? And you can see here that it's a big cluster, DC1 and DC2. So just to see, let's look at this nodes. Okay, describe nodes. This might be good enough, okay? Actually, let me do this. Let me clear this up and bring it to the top so that you guys can see it. Okay, you can see that it's running in EU Central 1, EU Central 1B, Central 1A, Central 1C. So it's already rack aware. Okay, so if one of these racks fail, no problem. Cassandra keeps ticking because it can actually service it from the other racks and so on. But now, not only that, what I've done is I have made it in such a way that I have spread it across multiple regions. Okay, so now if I do the same thing here, you will see. So this one was Frankfurt, right? I believe this was Frankfurt, and this is Dublin. Does that make sense? So I'm able to connect these two together and make it a Cassandra cluster. I did not do, I told you already, I'm not a networking geek, but EKS KubeFed was really cool. I leveraged the EKS KubeFed project and essentially made this happen, okay? I'm trying to think if there is anything else I need to show here. I showed you the nodes. You can see that it's running. Actually, maybe what I should do is I should bring up the presentation for just a brief second because I want to show you something which is really cool. Right here. Okay, view, slideshow. Okay, and this might give you a little bit more context. So this is the EKS KubeFed, and if you can't see it, don't worry too much about it. I'll explain this. Okay, so this is the Bastion host, 172.20, and then what it did was it created two VPCs in region 2 and region 1. Okay, so it was 172.21 on West and 172.22, I believe, on EU Central. Right? All of this was automatically created for me, which is really cool, right? And then all that I did was I enabled them manually by inserting the seed from one of these clusters into the other cluster, and then it can start gossiping. But now with Cassandra operator, you don't even have to do that. I don't have to manually install anything. All that I need to do is specify the control plane and then say these are the data planes, and then I'm going to inject the configs and everything works fantastically. All right, so let me see. The proof is going to be in the pudding. Let me see if it works, really. All right, so Cassandra operator, let me go. So what I'm going to show here is, let me go to the notes so that you don't have to. So I installed everything here. Okay, let me do this. I'll show you. Okay, so I have 3 clusters here. Okay, let me. Do you guys want me to increase the font level a little bit? Doesn't look like it's working, but it's fine. All right, I'll walk through this. So you can see here there are 3 clusters, right? AKS, EKS, and GKE, okay? So AKS is the control plane, and then EKS and GKE are the data planes, okay? So what I'm going to do here, again, just go back to the same command, right? Let me go to this EKS cluster, right? And then I'm going to show you that it's running. Basically, I'm trying to figure out what the control plane value of this is. Okay, and you can see here that this is running false because this is one of the data planes, right? So if I go back to my AKS, so if I do this, hopefully this is going to come back as true, right? Okay, so do you see that? It's basically true. And then what I can do is I install something called a Cassandra cluster. Okay, and all that I do here is kind of do this, and I'm gripping the DC. So what I'm doing here is, just trying to find the data centers. And you can see here, it's running on, where am I? Oh, yeah. So the first DC is an EKS, and the second DC is on GKE. You guys see that? So it's kind of cool. Let me go to GKE. Let me do a kube context. And let me go to the GKE cluster. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is look at the nodes, get nodes minus O wide. Okay, and you will see here, you will see the nodes that are running here. 2110, and I think it's opinionated implementation. 10.3 is on GKE. 10.1 is AKS, and 10.2 is the third one. Okay, whatever that is. Okay, so if I, for example, if I go to AKS, okay, and you'll see here, if I do the same thing here, you will see that this is 10.2. Okay, and if I go to the last one, which is EKS, you should probably see it as. And all this is done pretty straightforward, and I'll talk about that in a second. And you'll see that this should probably be 10. Oh, what happened? Oh, EKS, that's what I was looking for. So let me go to EKS, and this should be 10.1. Okay, so you see this? All of this is automatically enabled for me using the Terraform scripts that I'm going to show you about. Okay, so now what I do is I go back into my, and get the usernames. Okay, so username and password. I've already done this, so I'm not going to waste your time going through that. So let me run this. And I'm on EKS, so let's see if this works. Okay, so again, what I'm doing here is I'm running the command to see where the cluster is. And you'll see here there are two data centers, EKS and GKE, okay? And both of them are joined as one cluster, okay, which is kind of cool, okay? Because, oh, that's not what I meant. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to run. And all that I'm doing is I'm running the pod, and again, running the same node tool command. A lot of, again, Cassandra admins do this all over, right? And essentially, you have two data centers, EKS and GKE, joined together, okay? So pretty straightforward. Hopefully, that was illustrative of what I was going to show you. And let me round up with some resources. Okay, I finished the demo. What's next? Surprisingly, Cassandra.io has a lot of good documentation. Okay, I mean, that's one of the banes of technology, right? The technology is cool, somehow the documentation sucks, right? But actually, documentation is pretty good. So take a look at this. I myself wrote a how to multi-region with Cassandra and KubeFed. Okay, so take a look at this if you're interested. Why did we come up with Cassandra operator? The reason is to make it easy on multi-cloud, multi-region, multi-whatever, right? And that's the reason why we came up with the Cassandra operator. So might help to kind of dig into why, the rationale behind that. If you're interested in Astra, you can sign up. We give $25 credit a month, which actually is good for running production workloads. We run workshops every week. We get a lot of people from Europe, get a lot of people from Asia. All of them are free. Feel free to attend any of them, especially if you want to do a little bit more development. It's aimed at really beginning developers, but sometimes we have some advanced topics as well. Datastax.com workshops. In fact, I think this week on Wednesday, we have revamped our intro to NoSQL workshop. So if you're interested. By the way, anybody attended our workshops anytime? Never before? One person, okay. What do you think? Yeah, it's really cool because that kind of kept me sane for the last year or so, because even in a virtual scenario, we have literally 600 people participating, and maybe about 200 people are talking, talking and chatting and all that, and that's the only way, like I said, it's kept me sane.